like to welcome everyone to this important session on skilling up women in India. I'm glad to see that this topic is catching your interest. My name is Malmqvist. I'm the CEO and founder of Diversify Consulting, a leadership consultancy with a backbone of diversity and inclusion in all the services that we provide. And the topic that we are discussing and debating today is of course of particular interest, since skills requirement of our workforce today is changing rapidly due to globalization, due to new technologies, due to demographic shifts in the work market today. And India has a demographic advantage today, with being the youngest country in the world with an average age of 29 and 64% of the population in the ages 15 to 59. So this demographic advantage is predicted to last up until about 2040. So India has a rather narrow time frame to make use of this demographic advantage and to overcome its skills shortages. And also a very low percentage of women participate in the urban workforce and the workforce today, with a huge economic advantage of bridging that gender gap. So there's a pressing need to train and school more women to ensure that they are economically independent and empowered and participating in the workforce. So skill development is being given a top priority by the Indian government with Skill India mission, with a goal of skilling up to 500 million people by 2022 for both the national and the international work market. And this is a very ambitious and also very complex task, which needs to be coordinated, of course, amongst various stakeholders and various geographies. Also, when it comes to legal matters of combating discrimination, etc., this is, of course, important steps, as well as when it comes to personal and individual challenges in terms of attitudes and behaviors in addressing both unconscious and conscious biases. This is something that needs to be addressed with everyone, and in particular, of course, with decision makers. So in other words, making sure that people see skill for what it actually is, regardless of gender, regardless of age, and regardless of where you come from. So I have three very distinguished leaders with me here today in the panel who will speak of their experiences in building up very successful businesses, in breaking glass ceilings, in changing work opportunities for many, many women in India and elsewhere, and also working against intolerance and discrimination, of course. So I welcome Sairee Chahal, a heavily awarded female entrepreneur and founder of Sheroes, India, and you will talk about your experiences in, amongst others, establishing this hugely successful career community for women in India. Welcome. Please give Sairee a hand. And I also welcome Nivedita Bhasin, airline captain, instructor pilot, and once the youngest woman jet commander in the world. That requires another hand, I think. Thank you. So we very much look forward to hearing your input and your experiences. And finally, Ulrika Sundberg, Swedish diplomat and Consul General of Sweden in Mumbai, previously ambassador in Ireland, Belgium and Pakistan, experienced human rights advocate, and you will speak about your practical experience of your work role and Swedish companies in India, and we're very keen to hear you speak as well. So I thank you very much. So I give the floor to you, Sairee, please.
Thank you. Thank you so much. So I think before I sort of, share with you what we do and, I think it's important for us to draw from energies of nations and frameworks that have proven successful. And I think we're sitting right here in Stockholm where, the feminist foreign policy has become a role model to a lot of countries out there. And the topic we talk about today is really, really important because you can't build a good machine on 50% capacity, So I think the economic engines for countries like India need the contribution of women more than the contribution that women needed for themselves. So I think it's really imperative. But at the same time, I think from a society that's deeply patriarchal, I think it's important to put these things on nation-building priority list. So I'm glad we're talking about it. And then, of course, I'm a technology entrepreneur, and one of the things that sort of I always wondered about before I started this venture was, there is a lot of conversation around gender, and there's a lot of public discourse. There's a lot of work that's being done. But what I saw was a discrepancy, and which sort of stayed at two levels. So one is, so India celebrates 70 years of independence this week, right? And one of the things that has always sort of been the case in public policy was that everything related to women focused in certain segments, right? So it always assumed that the aspirations of women lay at grassroots, that women want small loans, women want to start small businesses, women just about want to strive to sort of get by. There was never an assumption in public policy or in business that, hey, you know what? They need to dream big, or they may want to set up large businesses. They may want to build billion-dollar companies. And I think that's the shift. And one of the things we exist at Sheroes is to sort of power up some of those elements. And you can only power up when you create solutions for scale. So net-net, we believe that change can only happen when it's change for everyone, and change is driven by every individual themselves. There's no amount of external change any government or any policy or any unilateral agency can bring about. So the whole intention of putting together Sheroes was that let's put change in hands of women and let them own it. Let them own the quantum of change, the pace of change, the quality of their aspirations, and the diversity of their aspirations. And some of our hypothesis has turned absolutely true, because today we are a community of about 1.5 million women from every possible zip code in the country. We work with about 17,000 companies of all shapes and sizes, the very big guys and the very small guys and the guys next door. But what we're realizing is every woman out there is charting her own roadmap. So we see a few trends which are very, very exciting and which are beyond the assumptions of, I guess, traditional policymaking. One is that micro-entrepreneurship and entrepreneurship are the most preferred form of finding their own roadmaps, And I guess it's also the time, because technology allows you, there is far more openness, there are far more open ideas. Dreams are not centered in metro cities. They don't belong to Delhi, Bombay, Bangalore. They actually belong to, towns you and I don't even know that they exist in the map. Small town India is really taking charge. And that's very compelling. And I think as a platform, we see it's our duty to now create technology solutions that every woman out there can adopt, whether she can read or write, whether she has been to a college or not, whether she's worked before or not, whether she wants to join the formal workforce, take to entrepreneurship, take to a creative career, take to a remote career, or whatever path that she chooses. So I think diversifying options available to aspirational women is the crux of change that we're driving.
Thank you. Thank you very much. And we'll return with questions a little bit later. We'll allow for everyone to say their piece first. Okay, so I welcome you to...
Hi, thank you,
Thank
Anna.
you.
And my panelists are here, Ulrika. Sairee gave a really lovely talk. And for me, I would like to share my story of my life, how I began as a young girl being the third woman pilot of India. You know, this was almost 40 years back when I started my flying. I was just 16. Actually, I was 15, and I dreamt big. I was in school, and our school was behind the diplomatic enclave, and we had a flying school over there. And every morning, I would see the planes flying around. And I would just wonder, I said, what is it like to fly in the plane? I mean, could I fly the plane? And there was no doubt in my mind, so I just thought, yes, maybe. And my sister, 2 years older than me, she is a brilliant lady, very academic, excellent in studies, and I knew I could match up to her in studies. So then what next? I mean, I wanted to do something, and I wanted to carve a name for myself. I said, maybe I can start flying. You know, if you're not good in sports, if you're not good in academics, and you want to achieve, you want to do something, then you have to do it. And who better can help you except yourself? I always dreamt of standing on the podium on the #1 position. Well, that never happened in school, but maybe, yes, I did follow my dreams, and here I am today. So when I was just 14 and a half, thank you. So when I was all of 14 and a half, I went to the gliding school, and I went to the instructor, and I went straight from school. So I had my school uniform, my skirt, and my uniform. And I asked the instructor, I said, I want to be a pilot. So he looked at me, you know, with my 2 pigtails, and I went there, and he said, I think you should finish your studies, but yes, if you really want to fly, come back to me a month before your 16th birthday. And then I will see how good you are, I will train you, and then maybe I will send you solo. So there I went back when I was 15 years and 11 months, and I joined the Delhi Gliding Club. I got my solo when I was 16, and when I was 17, I started my flying. So did my parents doubt me? I don't think they did ever, because all they wanted was that if I do something, I should do it well, and I should complete it. So that's what my father always said. Whatever you start, there has to be a closure to it. You have to finish it, and you have to do it well. And I saw them, actually, we grew up in a family with a little adversity, financial constraints. My father was a very successful marketing personnel in his work, but then he wanted to start his own business. So when he started his business, and if you're really honest and truthful, then people take you for a ride. And he lost a lot of money. So we grew up with my mother working very hard at home, you know, doing all the household chores, bringing us up, my older sister, me, and my younger brother. She would give tuitions at home, and she would save her money, and she would always reassure me that, you know, whatever you want to do, I'm going to help you. So you carry on, and don't worry about the money. So then I joined the flying school, but it was very, very expensive. I would have never been able to afford it. And luckily, my mother applied for a scholarship from the state, and I appeared for the exam. I got the scholarship, and the Indian state where I went to do my flying is Bihar. I don't know whether you all have heard of Bihar. It was, and it still is, one of the most backward states. And it's very oppressive for women to do anything, because over there, the men don't like to see the women coming up. That was then 30 years back. This was 1981 when I went for my flying. And I went through a lot of hardships over there in the flying school, because the boys didn't want me there. They thought I was an outsider coming from Delhi and doing my flying. The local people didn't want to see me. They had never seen women, you know, flying, let alone, you know, trying to do something so different. So that was a very hard life, but because the ambition, the drive was so much, I didn't care. I mean, I would just wear blinkers and walk on the road, and I would just not look here and there, and I pursued my dream. That was the age when there were no computers. So how did I hear about women pilots? I think where there's a will, there's a way. You know, you want to find out something, you look for things, you talk to people, and they help you if they see that you're really interested. I met one woman pilot of Indian Airlines. She was the second woman pilot, Captain Sudhamani Deshmukh, and she used to fly to Patna, where I was flying from. And I would ask, I said, yeah, I'm finishing my flying, now what next? She said, okay, come join Indian Airlines, because we are 2 of us, you'll be the 3rd one, we'll love to have you there. So that's how I joined Indian Airlines in 1984 as the 3rd woman pilot. when I joined, I mean, at that time, we never heard of feminism, of women's empowerment, of gender equality. I mean, it didn't strike us that we were doing something different. It's just that if you wanted to do something, you were doing it without making a big hue and cry about it. Okay, thank you. So she tells me the time is slowly running out. So we just followed our dreams. And so can we go to the next slide? So when I joined Indian Airlines, when I became a captain, I was the youngest captain at 26. And with the other lady, Captain Deshmukh, we operated the first ever all-women crew flight in the whole world. This was 1985, so which was a very big thing in national and international history. After that, you see my crew here today. We've flown in from Delhi to Stockholm with an all-women crew flight. And it's become the norm. So Indian Airlines and Air India have never discriminated against women. Though, I mean, they were not welcoming us, meaning they didn't say, okay, if you're a woman, come and join. Not like that. But they never discriminated. We were welcomed in a way that our training was the same. We had to prove in the same way. But being a woman, it was harder. So can we go to the next slide? Yeah. So here you see my family. I'm married to a pilot, and both my children are pilots, and they've just... and they've just now become captains. So both are flying as captains. My son flies the 777 for Air India as a captain. My daughter flies the Airbus 320 for Indigo. My husband and I, we fly the Dreamliner. And so what I want to show here is that when I faced a lot of difficulties, but for my daughter, it was just like, you know, swimming in like a duck swims in water. It was like that for her. So very easy, very simple. She doesn't make a big show about it. It's easy for the next generation. Many times I thought of giving up my job. I'm just going to take half a second. I was going to give up my job twice. One was when the children were growing up through adolescence, and I couldn't handle, you know, I couldn't look after them. So I thought it was better I stay at home. But then the kids said, Mom, no, we like you to work. We are very proud of you, so continue your work. So that's how I'm here, and my parents supported me, my in-laws supported me, and I think my family at Air India has really supported me. So with 33 years, I still have a few years now before I retire, but once I retire, maybe I'm going to join Sairee, maybe I'm going to join all your ladies and give back to aviation and the world what I've achieved. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Fantastic story. So, Ulrika,
yes,
please.
Thank you so much. Really, a really inspiring life story, I must say. As you pointed out, we have this feministic foreign policy. So when I arrived to Mumbai, I was wondering how would I try to make that operational? Because of course it covers all areas of our work. And I was fortunate enough to actually see the World Bank statistics for this year that, in fact, there has been a decrease of women in the workforce from 32% in 2011 to 27%. And of course, if you compare to China, which has 63%, it stands out. So obviously you felt there is a need to do something. And we sort of teamed up with the Chamber of Commerce, the Swedish India's Chamber of Commerce in Delhi, and we discussed what can we do. And at the same time, we had a business climate survey ongoing, and we discovered that 8 out of 10 of the Swedish companies were actively working on gender equality. And 7 out of 10 of them were actually working on skills development. So we sort of saw both the gender gap, and we saw the skill gap, and the gender skill gap. So we decided, what can we try to do? And the fact of the matter is that in my jurisdiction, in particularly in Pune, I have about 100 Swedish companies. And all of them had decisions from their boards that they need in their HR policies to work on towards gender equality and increase the gender ratio in the company. And 23 of them are also under the obligation under the CSR law from 2013, which means that 2% of their gains, yearly gains, have to go to CSR activities. So we started looking at this and decided that we should first do a mapping to see exactly what the companies are up to and how they try to operationalize their HR policies. And of course, this is early on since the law was passed in 2013, and we're only 17, so there is still a big learning curve. But we saw that there is definitely scope for both learning from each other, developing best practices, but also trying to look at alignment, maybe. The problem with the law is that the companies are not allowed to actually invest in CSR activities that will benefit them directly in their businesses. But it doesn't prevent them from doing something that can benefit another company, maybe another Swedish company. And what we discovered was that, for example, Ericsson was supporting micro enterprises of women who were manufacturing bags. These bags were in fact bought by IKEA. But they didn't know about this. So we felt, okay, here we have definitely room to both, spread the information so that they know exactly how they support each other, directly or indirectly. But also, maybe there could be skilling on one side, but then retention and recruitment on the other side. So we have launched this pilot, which we call Kraftsamla, which means join forces. And here, of course, we are going to work on the continuum, because, as you pointed out, there is a need first to make sure that the girls actually are enrolled, that they go to school, that they don't drop out of school, that then they get the higher education, so that they are recruited. You pointed out, and I think that your life experience is a beautiful example of the importance of having support from your family, that the social bias and the social pressures are not such that you abandon your career once you form a family. And then, of course, once you are promoted within the system, that you actually are giving mid-level training, and then if you have aspirations and you want to become a senior management, that you have that possibility. And of course, hoping to see more CEOs. There's only 8% of women CEOs in India. I think that ratio can be improved. So we call it the continuum. And that involves all Swedish actors then. That also involves the Swedish state, of course, the state of Maharashtra, and I'm happy to report that we have the support of Mr. Fadnavis, which is the Chief Minister of Maharashtra, for this. We need to influence the curriculum. We need to influence also the training that is provided in the technical institutes. We might also have to set up special training units, maybe even special schools, and maybe even business schools. All of this is in the making. I hope we have a panel like this in 10 years' time from now, then we'll see exactly what the result of this project is. But we're thinking of trying to start small. We'll start with Pune, and if we can get it right, then of course we'll try to replicate this in other places where we are present. But it's really a public-private partnership involving both the bilateral, the Swedish government, the Indian government, and of course the state government of Maharashtra in this case, and then all the NGOs who are working on supporting women, the UN system, who is of course also involved and pushing values, plus the companies. And I wanted to cite an Indian example, which I think clearly gives us an idea of what we could do, namely that there is a sponsoring of a particular ITI, where it's a company called Bharat Forge. They have set up a particular ITI so to ensure that they have trained students which they can recruit at the base for their personnel. And maybe that is something that the Swedish companies could consider also, like bus drivers, truck drivers, and others. And of course, you also mentioned this ICT and automation will also change the nature of work and might open up job opportunities for women in areas that have been traditionally very much let's call it male bastion, but you know, the heavy lifting, working in mining and so forth, and maybe manufacturing, which of course, robots are not going to be that difficult for women to manage. So we see a lot of opportunities, and our goal is, of course, to try to create synergies between the HR and the CSR activities, and create a pool of competent women that can be recruited by all the companies who are present in Pune. And if we manage to do this, we will increase the economical boost of India, and the potential is up to 60% if we are successful.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, all of you, for your inspiring and very interesting input and speeches. I would like to address you, Sairee, but also all of you as well with this question. But I know that you have an initiative called FlexiMoms, and where you're helping women to address social pressures of being involved in domestic issues by giving them hands-on practical help. If you could just tell us perhaps a little bit more on this, and how you see that companies need to change their formats, or I think you call it feminization of work, in order to actually capture these women and the skills of these women to attract them to these companies, because it's not only on the women's side, it's really the companies that need to do something, and there needs to be a shift in how the companies do things as well.
So our fundamental assumption is that companies need this more than women, because clearly, you know, growth comes from creating new levers, right? New levers of advantage, you know. And we all know the new levers of advantage are coming from what they call future of work, gig economy, remote work, micro-entrepreneurship, and of course, finding newer pools of talent, or finding newer groups of leverages, right? So where do you extract that leverage from? So one of the things that we truly believe in is that, you know, most people are smart enough to empower themselves. Most people know how to help themselves, provided the right levers are in place, right? So when we work with women who are part of, let's say, who live in small town India, who don't live in Delhi, Bombay, Bangalore, or women who are, let's say, educated but have mobility issues or have flexibility issues, that doesn't mean that we can't find ways to sink them back into the mainstream. And I think somewhere future of work and women at work are very closely aligned. And that's the, you know, hypothesis on which we are building this whole ecosystem. What powers this ecosystem is a lot of transparency. It's a lot of technology. So think of virtual offices. Think of, you know, irrespective of where this person's located, the work they do is as visible to their manager in office as it is to them, and as it to us as a platform. Think of, you know, avenues of creating on demand, right? Like we are so used to the on demand economy, right? We like the Ubers of the world and the, you know, food deliveries. Why shouldn't we apply the same principles to create new products and solutions in the same space? Right. So that's what we are doing. And the other thing we are doing is, like, for example, how Nivedita said, she's ready to give back because she has a lot of experience. There are so many professionals out there who are ready to give back because we also invested in this. It's part of creating the ecosystem. So we created a system of mentorship where somebody like her could get on and talk to a woman, maybe, you know, somebody in small town India who says, hey, you know what, I want to be a pilot. Can you tell me how can I do that? And that's creating connections. That's strengthening the ecosystem. And you're doing all of this by creating very simple platforms. You know, this is happening via a mobile phone. And the good thing is more and more Indians have mobile phones. Finally, it's getting into hands of women. It's a growing number. And that's what is creating the leverage.
Right, right. But you're of course doing amazing things for women in India today and providing many work opportunities. But when it comes to the government level, what would you say would be the most important task or important measure for them to put in place in order to make it easier for women to enter into the workforce and remain in the workforce?
Yeah. So if you ask me, there are two things I'd say. One is high-speed internet. I think if internet reaches everyone, we're going to bring a lot more women. And second is safety, law and order. Unfortunately, that's not something we can fix or somebody else can fix. Yes, there's a lot of citizen, play there. But these are two things that governments need to sort of really make a lot of investment in and commitment to.
Right.
I think it's important to create an enabling environment, removing legal obstacles, because in our survey we have noticed that we still, even if there has been changes to the laws, the local laws of working hours in Maharashtra, there's still an impediment for women to work after 6 o'clock. The obstacles there's a lot of legislation around sexual harassment, around discrimination. There's always this idea of reservations. But the practical aspects are such that you should remove which impedes the women from working after 6 o'clock, so that they could actually work in retail, for example. The other one, you touched upon it, is safety. Now the employers are obliged to provide transportation back and forth from the homes to the workplace and back. But also, and here I think there are different schools. This idea of having reservations is something that I see a lot in the Indian debate. Here in Sweden, that debate has a little bit been abandoned, because I think the women movement here has really pushed for merit rather. They have preferred to go down that route. But it doesn't mean that we shouldn't have a discussion, a bilateral discussion around this. I think also, and that's where we are very happy to have the support of the Chief Minister, because certain things will also come to what I described earlier. The curriculum. What are you going to teach the young children? What are you going to teach them at university? And what are you going to teach them in the ITIs? So we definitely need them on board. And of course, allocation of money at some point, because this cannot rest solely on the sort of shoulders of Swedish companies. It has to be assumed, nor on the Swedish government for that matter, to the extent that we are doing development cooperation. It has to be good. It has to be borne by the local government. But it's important to have all these actors on board, and clearly I think the advantage of having, for example, the Consulate General involved is that we can try to get an alignment of the actors, so that we actually create a critical mass and a momentum and eventually make a difference.
Great input. Obviously, all of you at different points in your lives and at different extents have been breaking glass ceilings, and you're Nivedita, you're speaking of the importance of having support from family and having a network around you that supports you. And what would you say would be what would be your advice for young and older women today wanting to enter the workforce, but that are struggling with that and to some extent have to break glass ceilings again? What would be your personal advice to them?
Yes. So our tagline at Sheroes says "Take charge." So actually, we use hashtag Take Charge, and I think that's what we want to apply to every situation. I think what lacks out there is a clear me space. I think in the whole setup somewhere, the ability to sort of park your aspirations and chase it is missing, and that's what leads to either ambition loss or severe obstacles in sort of getting to where you want to. So we always tell women, create your me space, and we're obviously a partner in that journey to sort of, support you while you're doing it. But you got to take that charge, right? And I think more and more women are. I see both the younger end of the spectrum and women, who say, hey, I've never worked. I'm 45 or I'm 55. My children are now grown up. I want to do something, and now I want to build my life for myself. And I see both sides. They're the most sort of empowered set because, they're all set, raring to go. And it's only going to amplify more. I mean, there's no reason to believe that this is not going to grow. So it's very compelling, and it's very heartening at the same time.
So this might be bit of a common question that might have been heard or answered before, but I still think it's important. And what I'm wondering is why is gender equality is an important and positive concern for men, and how would you communicate this in the best possible way?
I'll just give one aspect of this. Obviously, when you're talking to different actors, you see this economic argument actually goes down quite well. Also, that it improves the figures, the gains. But also, it's been interesting to see. I mentioned mining before. Of course, that is for most men who work in mining. When they see a woman coming in, they might get a little bit nervous. It's like, is she actually going to manage this, or is she going to pose us all at risk? So there, of course, you're running into the biases, and that's where the sort of convincing part needs to take place, and technology will empower the women, but once they have let them in and they have seen with the detail, the meticulousness with which women actually operate, it doesn't take long before the resistance sort of goes down, and they see that this actually also creates maybe a nicer atmosphere in the workplace. So but you have to, as you said, I mean, you have to take charge. You have to be a little bit persistent, and eventually the sort of walls comes down, but it takes time, and I think the best we can possibly do is just to push, so that people have the strength to continue to push themselves.
So true.
I think it's very important also for the first few to set a good example, because especially when you're coming into a field which is like a male-dominated field, especially with aviation, it's very, very essential for the first few to be role models, to be good at their job, to be well-behaved, to set a good example, because no matter what you do, everybody is looking at you, and they will set the bar very high for the first few. And if you do well, and if you are a good person, good example, then others have it easier to follow. And when they see that women coming into aviation especially can do a job as well as the male counterparts, then we are welcomed. And if we falter, I mean, at every step, people are watching you, and they're only waiting for you to make mistakes. So like I said, for my daughter, for the next generation, it's so much easier because they've seen us all their lives. I mean, for them, it's like second nature. Whereas for us, at every stage, we had to prove a point, whether it was command, whether it was a maternity policy, which had to be formulated for Indian Airlines, because there was no maternity policy when I joined. So there I was with my first child, and I was already flying, and I didn't know what to do. I mean, I was expecting, and I was still flying. So a maternity policy was formulated. At that time, we would get only 3 months leave. Now, 3 months leave is too short a period. Then Indian Airlines came up, was the first airline to say, we will give you 6 months of maternity leave, and for the first 6 months that your baby is born, we will allow you to do short flights. So that is so beneficial. If you have a small baby, you can feed the baby, you can breastfeed, you can be at home, and that's the advantage, So you are creating an environment where you're welcoming the person back, and so it's easier. Yeah.
Great advice.
I think somewhere it's also reinforcing that having men in the conversation is important, because men also fall victim to the same patriarchy that women fall to.
So we're a little bit pushed for time here, and we have to wrap up this session. There's so many more questions that could be asked and answered, obviously, but I'm looking forward to welcoming you on stage in a few years and see what this progress has been all about. So thank you so much for your input. And we would like to welcome your fantastic crew here up on stage, who have flown the first inaugural flight with Air India to be operated by an all-women crew. So congratulations and welcome up on stage.